Right now millions of men are scrolling her feed, convinced she's winning. The real story is uglier and it's just getting started. She posts bright photos with perfect edges and captions that sound like manifestos. Those images convince strangers and her friends, but they do not rewrite the hours she spends alone. For a short time the applause is intoxicating. Validation floods in and her brain drinks it like a drug. New routines show up as proof. A yoga class, a haircut, a plant on the windowsill. Change becomes a narrative she can tell herself to feel brave. Friends amplify the script with chorus lines of encouragement. That social reinforcement builds a fragile identity scaffold. It looks sturdy because everyone is clapping, but it's built from sound and light, not foundation. You start to feel small because you remember what was real and ordinary. She is performing a version of herself that cannot survive the quiet. The performance is transactional. Attention pays rent on her loneliness for now, but it never buys stability. Novelty fires the dopamine system, which tricks her into believing she's healed. 2 weeks of high energy are not evidence of deep work. Short-term thrills do not equal long-term repair. She confuses a spike in feeling for proof of transformation. That confusion is the design flaw of self-reinvention on demand. Early on she will interpret a compliment as confirmation of worth. A match on an app becomes a mirror reflecting the idea that she made the right call. But shallow mirrors distort truth. Men she meets serve methods, not meaning. He applauds the surface and misses the history that shaped her. His presence is a placeholder, not a partner. She mistakes attention for intention and mistakes speed for direction. The honeymoon is loud and comfortable, but it lacks roots. It can survive bright mornings and brunches but not the slow collapse of routine. While everyone celebrates the exit, the interior work waits like a bill with a deadline. She has swapped a shared ledger for a solo account that requires new skills she hasn't learned yet. Bills arrive. Logistics demand decisions. Small moments chip away at the confidence she staged. The brain resists admitting error because identity is at stake. Owning doubt threatens the whole story she's been telling. So she keeps performing because acting brave costs less than the pain of recalibrating. Performance requires props. A new outfit, a social calendar, selective photos. Those props hide the gaps for a while. They do not repair the wiring that built attachment in the first place. The illusion persists until the novelty fades and the scaffolding creaks. When the applause dies she will be left with the absence she disguised. And absence is a teacher that doesn't care about captions. It teaches with small merciless facts. The couch is empty, the phone doesn't buzz, the bed is big and cold. Those facts do not care about hashtags or curated mornings. They sit in the dark and demand reckoning. The early glow is a rehearsal. Real recovery is quieter, slower, and merciless about truth. What looks like liberation from a feed is often the first chapter of a longer reckoning and eventual growth. She wakes up feeling electric, convinced choice equals victory. The first mornings alone are vivid and sharp. She tells herself she is brave and the mirror agrees. New rituals arrive like trophies. A different breakfast, a solo walk, a journal left open on the table. She experiments with identity as if trying on coats. Each edition feels like progress because it is visible and immediate. People notice and say the words she wanted to hear. That chorus feeds a dangerous confidence, one built fast and thin. She believes change is linear because the proof is public. A haircut becomes a manifesto. A class becomes evidence. She stacks accomplishments as if building momentum. For a while momentum fools everyone including her. The bed is made, the plants survive, the calendar fills. Those surface wins create a narrative that drowns out doubt. But the narrative is performative by design. It exists to prevent the internal work she postponed for years. Acting newly independent is easier than excavating old wounds. The applause masks the ache that follows private hours. When compliments arrive, they are accepted without skepticism. She mistakes praise for progress and applause for therapy. Validation becomes shorthand for healing even though it is not the same thing. This honeymoon stage eats small problems whole by pretending they are solved. Bills, schedules, custody details lurk behind the vanity shots. Routine irritations that were shared responsibilities now land squarely on her. She has to learn to navigate logistics that once moved without thought. That learning curve is humbling and often humiliating. New competence comes with long pauses and mistakes. She posts victories and edits out the errors. Impression management becomes a full-time job. External encouragement reduces cognitive load, so she keeps leaning on it. But leaning is not building. The honeymoon period rewards optimism and punishes realism. Small gratifications are framed as breakthroughs to avoid facing bigger truths. She prefers action over introspection because action is a kind of anesthesia. This is a temporary currency. Bright days pay for dark nights later. The emotional bookkeeping is invisible on social feeds. Under the surface, old attachment patterns are still active. Her nervous system remembers routines she shared with you. Automatic cues, a song, a scent, a habit, trigger familiar pathways. Those triggers are not fixed by a new fitness routine or a fresh wardrobe. Neurochemistry doesn't care about imagery, it reacts to association. There is a difference between feeling proactive and being healed. Proactivity can be a sophisticated avoidance tactic. She trades deep work for visible gestures and calls it transformation. That trade-off keeps her identity intact without demanding the painful interior work. She can relinquish a partner but resist changing the parts of herself that made the partnership necessary. Temporary liberation can calcify into denial if not anchored to substance. The honeymoon is a rehearsal for something harder, honest reckoning. If she keeps performing, the eventual fall will be sharper because the contrast is greater. If she uses the momentum to face what she avoided, this stage becomes a bridge. What she does in these first months determines whether independence is a costume or a foundation. Choose truth, not applause, and build something real. Attention arrives fast and loud, like fireworks over a hollow field. Notifications pile up and she confuses noise for arrival. That flood feels like validation because it moves quickly and burns bright. Men compliment with economy, neat lines, practiced charm, predictable moves. Those lines fit into a template that rarely touches her history. Fast attention pressures vulnerability into performance. She trades honesty for entertainment and then wonders why depth never shows up. Casual intimacy substitutes for care and it feels dangerous because it is easy. The thrill is immediate, the substance never follows. In the beginning each reaction feels like rescue. She equates availability with interest and momentum with commitment. Men show up for momentary excitement, not the slow work of knowing someone. They offer presence as spectacle and leave when the show ends. Surface chemistry is seductive because it requires no reckoning. It promises connection but delivers fragments. She begins to map men by function: the flirter, the status boost, the distraction specialist. Each role supplies a brief ego patch that does not expand into trust. She absorbs flattery and files it under temporary currency. Then she realizes the bills still need paying and emotional debts remain unpaid. Quick hookups, energetic texts, flattering comments, they are transactions disguised as romance. The algorithm encourages repetition and reduces nuance. Profiles turn into catalogs and choices feel numerical. She scrolls through options and feels affirmed until the options turn into sameness. Similarity breeds the illusion of selection. When everyone looks like a selection, none of them stand out. Attention amplifies fear as much as it soothes loneliness. She begins to compare her inner life with highlight reels and comes up short. That mismatch erodes confidence bit by bit. Men who chase novelty often avoid responsibility. They escape difficult conversations and forget promises they never intended to keep. She learns their boundaries quickly because they never invite hers into the room. Emotional labor becomes her solo project again. Attention without accountability costs her humility and energy. She compensates with performative generosity and emotional overgifts. Those gifts are investments with no return. Sometimes the attention is the kind that hurts. The man who needs her only to feel desired. He mirrors desire but refuses attachment. She becomes an answer to his appetite, not a person with needs. That reduction feels corrosive over time. The dating pool rewards speed and punishes deliberation. Quick decisions create shallow commitments. Slow decisions ask for courage and reveal character. When she chooses speed, she sacrifices depth. But the marketplace pushes speed until discernment becomes countercultural. Discernment looks like scarcity in a feed of abundance. It becomes easier to take whatever attention arrives than to wait for someone who actually wants to know her. Waiting feels risky, settling feels safe in the short term. Regret often follows safety bought cheaply. The remedy is not cynicism, it is clarity. She must learn to value intention over volume. Quality asks for uncomfortable standards and patient testing. It requires resisting easy applause and honoring small consistent acts. The real work is choosing people who build rather than fill. That choice begins by refusing to confuse motion with meaning. Choose depth. Refuse to be another passing headline instead. You think the first date is proof, it's the exam. He looks polished, his stories land, the laugh sounds genuine, and you exhale. Charm works because it hides questions. When he leans in and remembers a detail from dinner, she feels noticed in a way she hasn't in months. That feeling is sharp and confusing. For a moment she thinks recognition equals rescue. Then small interactions reveal limits. He compliments what is visible and ignores what is private. He asks about her weekend but not about the late nights or the bills. He smiles at the kids but sidesteps talk about custody or schedules. Those omissions stack up like unpaid notices. She notices how quickly he moves from light talk to physical closeness. One hand on a knee becomes a test of boundaries she thought she had reset. The things she never said in the marriage come rushing back because they now matter in a new currency. She watches how he treats servers, strangers, and small people around him. Those tiny moments expose character faster than declarations ever will. She notices how often he says, "we," and what "we" actually includes. Rarely does it include accountability. The first messy truth is this: attraction is not empathy. She learns the difference the hard way. The conversation that feels easy at 8 p.m. unravels by 3 a.m. Promises made over wine dissolve when the daily grind arrives. His profile looked curated. His actual habits are unedited. That contrast forces an unwelcome inventory. She starts comparing his flaws to her old life and finds strange comfort in familiarity. It's not that he's worse or better in the absolute. It's that he's known, and knownness beats novelty when the stakes are real. The brain prefers predictability over chaos even when predictability was imperfect. Guilt creeps in because she fears that longing means she failed at independence. So she makes excuses. He's new, he needs time, she needs to be patient. Those rationalizations are survival tools, not clarity. They postpone decision and deepen confusion. As dates accumulate, she begins a quiet tally. How many listen, how many look away, how many follow through? The list becomes a mirror she didn't ask for. Each miss of attention is a reminder that presence is rare. She recognizes patterns that would have been invisible earlier. She hears the same jokes recycled across different men. She watches the same defensive moves reappear. And the more men repeat the same errors, the clearer the outline of what she truly valued becomes. This is where nostalgia sneaks in disguised as learning. She realizes she had standards that were never about perfection but about someone who stayed. That realization hurts because it is both honest and humiliating. It means the romance she sought was less about excitement and more about reliability. At this juncture, choices sharpen. Continue chasing surface highs or step back and map a new definition of worth. The first real cracks are not explosive. They are patient and methodical. They chip away at stories until the truth is the only thing left to face. When the stories fall, decisions follow, and the next move will define whether she rebuilds or repeats. This phase is not dramatic, it is cumulative. Small failures stack until they become a mountain. Mornings that once held routine now arrive as lists of small catastrophes. School forms, missed payments, a meal plan that collapses at 3 p.m. The adrenaline of novelty burns away and leaves raw fatigue. She keeps moving because stopping would mean feeling every neglected corner at once. Performance demands energy and the tank runs low. When every outing is a production, exhaustion becomes the default mood. Photo-ready moments require makeup, timing, and a script. Off-camera hours are where the work lives, and the work is boring, relentless, and unforgiving. She finds herself canceling plans not because she is free, but because the cost of keeping up is too high. Friends start to drift because pity has a short half-life. Support flares then dwindles. The people who cheered in week 1 can't carry the burden. Invitations thin out, messages slow, and the social calendar becomes a reminder of how fast an audience moves on. That shrinking spotlight makes loneliness louder. It feels like being on a stage with fewer seats while the props remain. Decision fatigue becomes the quiet enemy. Choices accumulate until they become oppressive. Where to put the kids on holiday? Which bills take priority? Who to call about a broken boiler at midnight? Shared responsibilities used to be shared strengths. Now each one lands on a single set of shoulders. Every small decision is proof that competence is being rebuilt in real time with an audience that expects perfection. Sleep becomes unreliable. She wakes at stupid hours, replaying conversations and rehearsing better responses. Stress sharpens into anxiety that can feel physical. A knot behind the ribs, a stomach that won't settle, a chest that tightens without warning. Panic doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sneaks in as irritability or sudden tears. Those reactions shame her because they contradict the confident image she broadcasts. To avoid the sting, motion becomes default. She fills days with classes, dates, events, renovation projects, anything that prevents empty hours. Activity is a sedative, but it costs honesty. The more she moves to outrun feeling, the more brittle progress becomes. Exhausted motion is not healing. It is an expensive distraction. Other women react in patterns. Some stay for praise, others distance quietly. Single friends can become competitors when options thin. Couple friends recalibrate to avoid complex truths. Social friction builds and the support network reshapes into something smaller and less forgiving. Kids notice the shifts. They mirror tension with misbehavior, questions, and grief. Parenting under stress is another skill. She improvises, apologizes, and rebuilds trust in increments. Those small repairs are meaningful but slow and exhausting. Money tightens the frame. Financial strain changes options into calculations. Independence becomes defined by budgets and compromises. The fantasy of effortless freedom hits a ledger. Choices grow pragmatic. The slow collapse is a teacher without mercy. It forces inventory. What can be carried, what must be changed, what needs asking for help. For some the lesson starts a painful strengthening. For others it becomes a story of doubling down on denial. Either way, the middle months demand a reckoning that will not be postponed. She begins to redraw history in soft strokes, trading messy truth for a cleaner, kinder narrative she can live with. Memory is plastic. Emotion is persuasive. Together they remodel the past into a version that defends the present. Admitting error would dismantle a carefully constructed identity, so the only viable option is reinterpretation. She trims details that hurt and amplifies moments that flatter. Arguments become proof of incompatibility rather than failures of compromise. Small kindnesses she once gave are rewritten as control. Moments of boredom are elevated into moral reasons to leave. Stories are easier to live inside than the raw landscape of regret. She surrounds herself with witnesses who will corroborate the new script. Friends repeat the lines. Social media provides staged evidence. Selective memory supplies the gaps. Collective narrative reinforces private delusion. When everyone tells you the same story, dissent becomes improbable. Language changes to match the fiction. I deserved better becomes a chant that bends perception. The rewriting creates moral furniture that justifies new choices. It turns uncertainty into righteousness and makes walking away look inevitable. Cognitive dissonance is resolved not by truth but by narrative welding. She prefers the certainty of the invented plot to the chaos of contradictory facts. Identity glues itself to the role of the hero who escaped rather than the person who made a painful error. But it also creates distance from reality. Reframing protects her from immediate shame but not from long-term consequences. When behavior is reframed, accountability slips through the cracks. People she hurt are recategorized as toxic or controlling, even when that simplification erases complexity. Blame becomes a tool to maintain self-cohesion. She learns to substitute moral clarity for ambiguity because ambiguity is psychologically dangerous. The new story requires maintenance. She curates evidence. Old photos are captioned differently, conversations are selectively remembered, apologies are minimized or excised. Routines shift to support the narrative. She chooses activities that look transformative rather than work that actually is. This performative reshaping can last for years because it is rewarding in the short term. Comfortable stories reduce cognitive strain and offer momentum without repair. But rewriting the past does not heal neural pathways made by time and habit. Attachment circuitry remains, and the body keeps score even when the mind edits the log. Physical cues, family rhythms, and mundane triggers continue to pull at memory. Those pulls can create moments of rupture when the fiction collides with fact. Glimpses of truth arrive as small sharp sensations, a scent, a song, an unedited photograph. When those ruptures accumulate, the revised narrative starts to fray. Some women double down, seeking louder affirmations to reseal the story. Others crack and face the harder work of reckoning. Reconciliation with reality requires humility, shame tolerance, and a willingness to take responsibility. It is a quiet, unglamorous process of returning details to their original context and accepting the consequences. That labor is costly because it threatens the identity she paid to maintain. But it is the only path that actually changes the landscape beneath the story. Truth demands daily small acts of courage. The alternative is to live a long life as a convincing lie, surrounded by echoes that never let truth breathe. The marketplace is ruthless. It doesn't care about intentions or stories. Profiles are reduced to thumbnails and a few punchy phrases. Algorithms judge engagement, not integrity. What appears popular gets promoted, what looks difficult gets buried. She learns that optimization, not authenticity, often wins first impressions. Competing on platforms means competing with an invisible system that rewards youth and spectacle. Men with fewer responsibilities are easier to match with by design. Profiles without baggage slice through the noise and attract attention more efficiently. Dating becomes a shallow economics problem. Supply, demand, and filters. Preference lists that once felt reasonable now collide with statistical reality. Suddenly preferences are choices under constraint, not free wills. The pool that matched her hopes is smaller than she assumed. Quantity of options does not equal useful selection. Many candidates are looking for casual validation, not partnership. Heavily curated bios and rehearsed banter hide limitations. She meets people who are great at first impressions and terrible at follow-through. That pattern teaches her about scarcity in a concrete way. Options thin as filters increase. The more specific the criteria, the fewer viable matches. Age, kids, and history act like hard parameters in an equation that rarely favors those who carry them. Some men see complexity as risk and swipe left accordingly. Others see opportunity and mask intentions until momentum makes compromise easier. This economy penalizes nuance. Commitment costs are higher for those who would have to support a family they didn't father. Risk aversion becomes a selection force. The result is an uneven marketplace where abundant attention can coexist with deep loneliness. She notices how often earnest profiles are hollow in practice. Messages that start promising peter out when reality requires effort. Ghosting becomes a normal operating procedure. It's easier to vanish than to explain complications. That evasion teaches her to distrust early enthusiasm. Trust becomes a premium good. It requires time, consistency, and visible sacrifice. Meanwhile, competitive pressures push her toward choices that feel expedient. Lowering standards looks like adaptation but often functions as a survival tactic. Short-term compromises accumulate into long-term regret. Some women respond by pivoting strategy, refine criteria, prioritize red flags, or cultivate arenas outside dating where deeper bonds form. Others double down on the platforms, increasing activity to chase signals and hoping frequency produces a match that sticks. Both strategies can work, but both demand emotional labor and strategic discipline. There's also the social tax. Single parents are judged, questioned, and occasionally avoided. Community norms privilege coupleness and penalize those who diverge. External judgment can harden into self-judgment. The market's cruelty is not just about numbers. It reshapes self-perception. She sees her projected future shrink when options fail to materialize. That compression can trigger panic, poor choices, or a recalibration toward realistic goals. The antidote is not bitterness, it's clarity and adaptability. Recognize constraints, tighten priorities, and invest time where intention resides. Build a life with broader value than dating outcomes alone. When identity is not hostage to the marketplace, choices become less desperate and more aligned with real needs. Patience acts like armor. Disciplined standards attract people willing to build, not just browse. Prioritize depth and refuse to be priced out of worth over cheap approval. The house gets louder with echoes she can't fill. Weekends used to blur into shared rhythms. Now they collapse into long stretches she must manage alone. The evenings become a test of endurance rather than relief. Where there was once automatic closeness, there is scheduling and planning. Carpool, custody handoffs, two calendars that never line up. Those logistical gaps are not just inconvenient, they are constant reminders of loss. Small rituals that used to be effortless now require intention. Meals, bedtime stories, weekend plans. Every item is a decision she makes solo, and that accumulation steals energy. Physical absence becomes a persistent ache. Not lust or longing exactly, more the missing of habit. She misses the incidental touches that threaded days together. The brush of a shoulder, the casual arm around a waist, the hand that steadied her. Without those anchors, her nervous system treats normal life like a threat. Her body reacts before her mind has processed the change. Tighter jaw, restless sleep, a pulse that spikes at minor stressors. Sleep turns fractious. She wakes in the small hours replaying conversations or imagining what could have been different. Night becomes an arena for rumination. Thoughts spiral when the house finally goes still. Food habits shift. Some eat to fill the silence. Others lose appetite when the kitchen no longer hosts two plates. Energy reserves drain faster because emotional labor is invisible but heavy. Loneliness is not a single feeling. It is a cluster of demands that arrive without warning. It shows as boredom, as shame, as a prickly edge on otherwise ordinary hours. Social media amplifies the pain by turning other people's lives into a continuous highlight reel. Comparisons harden into judgment and then into self-doubt. Old friendships fray because shared couple routines evaporate. New friendships are slower to form when adult life is already scheduled. The safety net thins just when she needs it most. Children register the shift with blunt honesty. They test boundaries, cling more, or act out in ways that force hard conversations. Parenting alone requires emotional bandwidth and logistical skill simultaneously, a double load that few applaud. Financial strain compounds the isolation. Bills demand attention. Freedom looks different when it arrives with a ledger. The lack of touch has physical consequences. Decreased oxytocin, increased cortisol, and the body learns to expect less connection. Those chemical shifts make sadness feel more permanent than it is. Performance becomes a coping strategy. She stages happiness to avoid questions and to protect pride. That performance delays repair because pretending reduces the urgency to change. The antidote is not frantic activity, it is deliberate connection and honest work. Small, steady routines replace absence with structure. Reliable sleep, planned social time, therapy or group support, regular exercise that isn't punishment. Boundaries with well-meaning friends help too. Not everyone can carry the same emotional load. Learning to ask for help is a muscle that takes practice. Grief needs naming and space, not polishing for public view. Over time, consistent small acts, showing up for appointments, keeping promises to herself, building new rituals, rewire loneliness once taught. It is slow and ugly, but it is how a private life becomes truly livable again. She wakes to a private argument between memory and meaning. For months she lived on conviction. Now those convictions collide with facts outside her control. The mental ledger demands reconciliation. Choices recorded as courage, outcomes recorded as pain. Cognitive strain shows up in everyday living, scattered focus, sudden irritability, decisions that once flowed now stall. Her mind juggles two opposing truths and the effort exhausts her like physical labor. That tension isn't a moral failing. It's a biological reaction to holding incompatible beliefs. Sometimes it comes as restless nights where replayed scenes loop without resolution. Sometimes it arrives as blankness, an absence of feeling that feels worse than acute sorrow. Emotional numbness is a defense, a system-wide dimming that protects from rupture. Anxiety creeps in under the radar and then announces itself with symptoms. Racing thoughts, sudden sweating, that noise behind the ears. Panic can be a surprise guest in mundane moments. A grocery line, a school pickup, driving home from work. She learns how fragile her equilibrium is when ordinary tasks become tests of composure. Shame often hides inside the dissonance. Admitting doubt means admitting error, and that admission stings. So she constructs avoidance strategies. Busier calendars, louder feeds, new projects that distract without fixing the core. Those tactics buy time but not repair. Therapy, when sought, forces the body to register truth slowly. It shows how narratives learned over years can be unpicked one honest sentence at a time. Deep work requires patience and the humility to sit with discomfort without flinching. Medication helps some people stabilize chemistry. Counseling teaches tools that change behavior. Both are practical steps, not symbols of defeat. Regret that is unprocessed calcifies into bitterness. Processed regret softens into lessons. The difference is measured in daily acts. Showing up on time, keeping promises to children, answering necessary calls instead of letting them pile. Small consistent choices are the scaffolding of new neural pathways. Habits matter more than speeches. Repeating kinder actions rewires instinct. Relearning trust in herself, to make decisions, to set boundaries, to accept help, is slow work. It requires tolerating uncertainty because certainty is often the mask that led her astray. She must practice saying the truth out loud to people who matter. Accountability partners, small rituals, and repetitive tasks anchor change. Sometimes recovery looks ugly. Stumbles, relapse into old defenses, impatience with progress. Those setbacks are evidence the system is trying, not failing. What matters is persistence, not perfection. As the months fold into years, the heavy energy of dissonance lightens if tended to. Neural pathways that once favored avoidance weaken and new circuits that favor integration strengthen. That biological shift shows up as curiosity replacing defensiveness, risk taken with deliberation, and empathy returning to conversation. Her inner voice becomes less rigid and more candid. She stops needing a single grand narrative to justify her choices. Instead, she carries a more complex version of herself, one that accepts regret as data rather than destiny. That maturity does not erase pain, but it converts pain into an instrument for wiser action. And in that conversion, life becomes bearable again, not because the past changes but because her relationship to it does. This moment splits into two paths: admit the mistake and rebuild honestly, or double down on the fiction and grow colder around it. Admitting error means lowering defenses and accepting shame as a price for clarity. That route requires more courage than any dramatic exodus because it asks for steady humility, not spectacle. You have to own the small harms, apologize without conditions, and accept consequences that are practical and lasting. Rebuilding honestly looks like showing up to the small work: reliable presence, repaired routines, consistent promises. It is the opposite of fireworks. It is slow, methodical, and unsensational. Repair asks for demonstration, not declarations. If she chooses truth, the process will be uneven. Trust will return in increments and skeptics will count every misstep. Repairs often begin with children, keeping commitments, attending school events, and honoring co-parenting plans. Those acts matter more than grand statements because they reshape daily life. Consistency becomes currency. It buys back credibility inch by inch. Change needs witnesses, so rebuilding requires public evidence of private change. That evidence will be awkward at first: awkward conversations, small apologies, corrected behaviors in real time. If she resists owning error, the lie accrues like debt. It builds a persona that defends itself with anger and recruits allies who validate denial. That path feels safer because it avoids immediate pain, but it creates long-term isolation. The social groups that reinforce the decision will harden into echo chambers, and outside perspectives will be dismissed as attacks. Living inside a defended story makes new growth nearly impossible because any contradiction threatens identity. People who choose this route often become louder rather than wiser. They trade internal work for external rhetoric and surround themselves with proof that supports the story rather than tests it. Meanwhile, your life proceeds with or without reconciliation. You keep improving because rebuilding yourself is an independent project. Ironically, becoming more capable quietly undermines the myth she used to justify leaving. Your forward motion is not spite. It is the consequence of choosing to build rather than brood. If reconciliation is on the table, timing is brutal and specific. It arrives only when both parties are willing to show change through behavior, not promises. Reunion is not a rewind. It is a new contract forged from clearer terms and better boundaries. It demands that past wounds be acknowledged and future patterns be negotiated with humility. There is no guarantee. Some losses are final and deserve acceptance. Forgiveness can be generous and practical, but it requires work that is earned daily. For many, the wiser path is not reconciliation but transformation, accepting the cost, learning hard lessons, and constructing a life that does not depend on approval. That path prioritizes integrity over vindication and growth over vindictive narratives. If you choose this, your life becomes a demonstration of values rather than a validation of grievance. Either road requires radical honesty about motives and consequences. Either road is costly and neither is tidy. So act deliberately, refuse the easy public narrative, do the unseen labor, and let days prove your truth. No shortcuts. No excuses. Subscribe for more blunt, useful breakdowns on how to rebuild, stay grounded, and win the long game.